If you want to support our podcast financially, please visit patreon.com/IIMBSB. Also, email us with questions or ideas at ifimaypodcast@gmail.com.
So today is a very special episode. You are going to hear a conversation between me, Justin, and my mom, Rebecca. And we are going to be talking about the ways that we have been intentionally working on our relationship over the last 5 years or so. And we're going to talk about how we went to therapy together and how we are healing our intergenerational trauma and breaking a trauma cycle, which is really cool. So you're going to hear a conversation between me and my mom today that Dan is not going to be a part of. So it's only girls, no boys allowed. Welcome to If I May Be So Bold, a podcast about relationships.
The ones we have with others, the one we have with ourselves.
And given that Dan and I are a couple, you're going to be hearing about our relationship too.
I'm Dan Epstein, a recording artist, former opera singer, and relational coach.
I'm Justin Waring Crane, a therapist, recovering perfectionist, and karaoke star.
Okay, so in a second, you're going to talk to your mom and sort of process in real time where you are in this relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And there are things I know from being around you that there are things that you've been aware of for a long time that you haven't been so satisfied about your connection with her, having judgments towards her or being triggered by her, but not saying anything and kind of staying in the same pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And you made this decision to not do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that feel?
It feels good. I think I resisted making the decision for a long time. The decision being, okay, do I want to work on this relationship? Do I want to show up in this relationship in a real way? I really resisted making that decision because I could sense that my mom wanted to be closer, but I was still so mad at her and hurt by her that I just did not want to give her that. So if I were to show up authentically or let her know that something was bothering me, I would be at risk of maybe, deepening the relationship in a way that I didn't want. So I really have been resisting, resisting showing up authentically in the relationship. And it's not even, maybe I reached a breaking point and decided now I'm ready to work on this, or I'm ready to stop punishing her, ready to stop withholding love from her. Maybe I just kind of burned out on that and was not getting a lot out of our interactions because I was not bringing my whole self to them. So they were pseudo interactions and they were a lot of check-ins or catch-ups, what's going on with you? What's going on with you? And it's it stayed very superficial. And I was this sucks. It's staying so superficial. Meanwhile, I was doing everything in my power to keep it superficial. So now I feel good making this decision to deepen the relationship. And I even had a moment where I was I kind of want to text my mom about something where before we had this conversation, sometimes I'll send her a link to something that I think she would be into or that I'm really excited about. but it's pretty rare. I'll usually, send those things to my friends, but not to her, because then again, it's like, oh, this could spark a conversation and she might take this and run with it and, think that I want to be closer or, want to have a conversation with me about it that I don't want to have. So,
yeah.
But the other day I listened to a great podcast episode and I felt like sending it to her. And as I sent it, I was like, oh, that's kind of nice. I just had that thought. I was like, oh, that's kind of nice. I think now it's starting to put into practice. It's like I've said the things that I want to say to her. And now we're moving into more of a, not that it's like, first you say the things you need to say, then you move into the practice phase. No, it's just, I wasn't able to know how I felt about deepening the relationship till I actually started doing that. And now we're happening. It's happening.
Till you were explicit about actually where you were with her and with the relationship, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. She had no idea that I was feeling this way because I wasn't revealing that I was feeling this way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I was thinking it would be really cool for you and I to do an episode, just the two of us, about, how we are working on our relationship and, how we're approaching that. And, the intergenerational trauma that we are up against, but that we were able to identify what it was. And then we're taking steps to break the cycle. Okay, cool. I think it would be helpful to start with, tell me, people who don't know you, tell me about what your life was like growing up. I know that's pretty broad, but just a little bit, a snapshot of, the family that you grew up in, the world or the community around you growing up, and what that was, and what that was like for you.
In community, I'm glad you're mentioning that. I'll make sure I touch on it. I was born the third child, and my brothers were 7 and 9 years old when I came along. So the story that I sometimes tell myself, not very generously, is my mom was good at being a mom. So once you have 2 school-age children, what's your identity? Again, this is my story in, looking back. So I was told, yes, we very much wanted you. And then 2 years later, my sister was born. So 2 boys, 2 girls. My parents worked for a Christian church organization in Beirut, Lebanon, where my sister was born. I was born a year they were on furlough, and then grew up in this close-knit church and educational community in Beirut for the first 6 years of my life. So I knew all the people in my world pretty much. They were students in the dorm. We lived in a dormitory apartment. My father was the dean of men. And I felt very safe, even if I didn't feel important or seen, because I was a small child, because I was a girl after 2 boys. The boys were pretty golden in the way it was conveyed, this is what you should do when the boys were your age. This is how it worked. And very traditional roles for my parents. So I observed my mother as a full-time mom and homemaker. So the gender roles were very clear. My father worked outside of the house during the day. He would come back for a meal. Things were organized around his needs and his schedule because he was the breadwinner of the family. And I found out later in my life, there must have been some kind of implied agreement between my parents that my father would, they're both parents, of course, but my father would spend time with the boys, the sons, who he taught to play soccer, football, soccer. And then when we moved back to the States, we moved to the States. Neither of my parents are from here. They went and learned to play golf together. So they had a lot of physical activity that was considered play and male bonding time. And he also worked on cars with them. My dad was a very handy, kind of mechanically inclined person. And the understanding, I believe, when I talked to my dad later, after my mom passed, was that he thought she was doing similar things with me and my sister, but she wasn't. She wasn't. We moved when I was 6, first to Bakersfield, California. Then we ended up, it was a terrible year. It was a dreadful year for everybody. And then we moved to Maryland. And I did first grade again because the move was so traumatizing.
Oh my gosh. So that is really interesting because I also did first grade, not quite, maybe twice, but definitely like 1.5 times. So I didn't realize that you also had that.
I don't think about that. I'm pretty sure when you were doing it, it seemed like, oh, this is a doable thing. We need to watch her learning style. Yeah, you were traumatized by public school when you went to school.
Yeah.
Remember your teacher screaming and, oh, so scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I moved with the family, of course, because I'm a child without power, and did first grade again. Again, we're in an educational church-based community where I know so many people. You know, I'm doing internal family systems work with my therapist, and good girl is one of my parts. Good girl really wants to be compliant, really wants to live up to expectations. And that's because when I was small, that was a really common frame or a phrase. We even said our nightly prayers, help me to be a good girly.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So you didn't really, so you're seeing your brothers being sort of favored by one or maybe both of your parents, and going off and spending a lot of quality time with your dad and doing outdoorsy, sporty type things, fun things. And then the assumption was, your dad had the assumption that when you and your sister were, at home or wherever you were with your mom, that you guys were doing, whatever girls do to have fun, but that was not the reality. So what was the reality?
No, it wasn't. My mom was very task oriented, and my heart breaks in so many ways when I think about this. Her worth was so tied up with her work and her ability to do things well. She was absolutely a perfectionist. And she spent a lot of time doing things properly. Then she would occasionally let herself sit down and rest, read a book maybe, but she would apologize. She'd fall over herself saying, oh, I'm being so lazy. Rarely did I see her sitting still just to catch her breath or enjoy herself. Usually she was mending or folding the laundry. There was something to be done. And my sister and I, so her not guilty pleasure, but she loved to sew, and she was a wonderful seamstress. She would make a little place in the house. Often it was in a closet where she would have all of her sewing things set up, and she would spend hours meticulously constructing clothes from often bargain bin fabrics, beautifully made, but often fabrics that I couldn't really stand wearing, like double knit polyester and orange and white. It's a pantsuit because that was a thing. So it's an almost dress with matching pants underneath it. 1970. Let's all go back in time.
Yeah. How old were you at that point?
So I would have been the pantsuit. Actually, this is more like 72, 73, I think second or third grade. And I tried to be brave and say, I bet you can't guess where I got this outfit. Of course, I didn't want to say my mom made it.
You said that at school?
I'm trying to be, put a I'm cool face on this really not cool outfit. So I would have been
That's
9,
funny.
maybe, or 10, because remember, first grade, I'm 7, second grade, I'm 8, third grade, I'm 9. Yeah. 9-year-old, I think, when I said that.
So your mom is slaving away, making these, tearing things up if it's not right, redoing it, spending hours and hours to make these garments that you absolutely don't want to wear. And it didn't really matter. It didn't really matter like what you thought of them, right? It wasn't about,
Oh, no.
do you like this? It's
Right.
about, don't you know how hard I worked on this? And, you're going to wear it. And, it wasn't about like, do you like it? And do you want to put it on? Like there was none of that, right?
Not a lot. Put it on.
Yeah.
Oh, don't you look nice?
Right. Yeah.
How do you feel? No, we didn't talk about feelings or do you like this or not like this? Do you have an opinion as a child?
Yes.
Not so much of that went on.
So let's talk about that. So why do you think that was? And, where do you think that came from for both of your parents?
When you're in a large family, or by the same token in my dad's story, a violent family, I don't know how much time and attention is given to how people feel. It's just not high on the list. And besides that, who even knew? Who had the tools? How many people would say, I'm recognizing this feeling? Feelings were acted out or they were shoved down.
Right.
You displayed them or you judged them.
They were out of control or they were completely pushed down.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So they really didn't have any model for that.
They didn't.
Yeah.
And it took me a lot of therapy to forgive them for not looking, for not wanting to grow, or for them, church was the answer for so many things.
Yeah.
And that also added a layer of this religious expectation that you'd have your shit together. In the holy sense, I mean, of course.
Religion was such a huge part of your life growing up and into adulthood. And then, it became a big part of my life up until about, I guess, middle school, high school, in the sense of like going to church and being part of like a church community, even though, the impact of religion followed me and still follows me. So, okay, let's fast forward, because our listeners know, if they listen to the episode that you did with Dad, they know how you met Dad, got married, moved to Sudan. So let's fast forward to, as you're becoming a parent, you have me when you're how old? 28?
I had you in April.
29.
Let's see. I turned 29 the month after you were born.
Okay. So you're 20, you have me when you're 28, almost 29. And then 2 years later, you had my brother, Graham.
Yeah.
And so like what, did you always know that you wanted to be a parent? Was it not even something that you considered because you're like, yeah, this is just what people do and this is what I'm going to do? I know that Dad says that you were really good with kids, and that he was really attracted to that. And
you. So with the 2 older brothers, they got married and had kids. So he met me when our family already had 4 grandchildren. Each of my brothers had at least 2 children by the time we met. So he saw me interacting with them. And you're right, I didn't give it a lot of thought. I thought, of course I want to have children. Actually, when he started talking seriously, I said, let's have 4. He said, well now. Why don't we try for 2 and see how it goes?
So yeah, I think this is interesting. Like you said, let's try for 4, maybe using your own family as a model. And
Absolutely.
at this point in your life, you were the picture of your family that you had in mind was very different than it is now. Like at that point, tell me about, how did you view your family at that time?
So are we looking at Ken and the kids, my family at that time, or Rebecca as part of this?
No, family of origin. Family of
origin at that time. Very supportive and caring. There were the people that I would hang out with on family vacation when we had time off in the summer. We would make the trip from Michigan to drive all day down to be with them in South Central Pennsylvania. And it was like a big sleepover party with you and your cousins.
Yeah, yeah. I remember that so well. And I also just remember too, like the stress of getting to church in the morning. And it was like, you had to be at church at like fucking 8 a.m. or something. It was really, really early. And I just remember like that it was like such like a mad dash. Like we would wake up, me and my girl, like my two girl cousins who I was closest to in age, who are twins, we would all be getting ready for church. And, it's like the expectation is that you get dressed up and you make yourself look a certain way in order to present yourself at church. But then it's like, we would be given a lot of flack for like, you guys are taking too long to get ready. It's like, so it's like this double bind of like, well, we're not supposed to take too long to make ourselves presentable, but we also need to look a certain way. It was just understood that we had to like get our appearance to a certain level to
go to church. That memory, I didn't know, but it absolutely resonates and makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was kind of like people like, I'm not going to name any names, but like people in the family sort of rolling their eyes of like, like the girls are like holding us up and it's like, so, frivolous or whatever that they have to like put on their makeup or like put on their clothes. But it's like, that was also the expectation. So, I mean, that kind of brings us to, as I'm developing consciousness and like, getting, growing up in this church community, like I absolutely got a lot out of it too. I think namely, my love of music, and I was exposed to a lot of music, even several times a week. It's like church was not just once a week, hun. Church was 5 times a week. It felt like, like, cause 3 nights a week, you have maybe I'm really exaggerating. Maybe it's just once a week where you had those, Bible studies essentially that we would go to or would, be at our house.
Right. It was once a week.
It was just once a week.
But yeah.
Felt like 3 times a week. Yeah. So we had, a weekly Bible study we would go to a friend's house in the church community, or we would host it at our house. And those were really fun times because as a kid, you pretty much just got to play. Like, yeah, you had to sit through like a boring lesson that you never got anything out of or like didn't really pay attention to. But then it was all about just like playing with the other kids, and like people would like one house like had a trampoline and we loved going on the trampoline. And so it ended up just being like, yeah, like a lot of socializing. But yeah, I think then as I got older, I was just really struggling to figure out like what I wanted and like who I really was, because I just felt this like, inner split happening where I felt like in order to be accepted in the church community, I needed to act a certain way and dress a certain way and, be pure and it was, and not do drugs or drink. And it was like, very at odds with how I was feeling internally. Like, I want to have a full range of human experience and I want to just get to feel like I have freedom to explore things for myself. And
I can only imagine how hard it was for you watching me, because I was pretty rigid.
Yeah.
And that would read as not attractive and scary, whether you named it or not.
Yeah. And I just remember that I didn't want to fight with you about it because that seemed too risky, or it just seemed too scary. Like I was feeling like if I reveal to my parents that I want to have sex, or I want to, try alcohol, like it's going to be this whole fight, and maybe, they're going to disown me, or, kick me out of the house. I didn't know. So it was just like,
ooh, those are scary thoughts.
Right. Which, yeah. So I was like, I just better play it safe and pretend that I am being a good girl, and then, but then go about doing all those things anyway. So then there's that, just that inner split that happened. So
sure, you're in conflict.
Yeah. And I remember the times that I did kind of push back or fight with you. I absolutely hated it. And it just didn't, it was like, okay, now I realize why I've been avoiding this. And I'm just going to go back to avoiding the conflict at all costs. And just kind of on the surface, pretending like everything's cool. So that kind of set a precedent for me of just like, pretend everything's fine, even if you don't feel that way towards your parents. And then like, you can at least have a little peace because there won't be any like, any fighting, that's going on. So yeah, but I remember when it comes to drugs, I remember that, it was very, very scary for you when Graham was growing weed in his closet. And it was so, I think, really terrifying for you.
Oh, yeah.
And could you talk about that experience a little bit? And I want to just compare notes with you because I have really specific memories around this time. And I want to hear like how you remember that and how you make sense of that now.
I don't know that we can ever make sense of it because it was such a mind fuck for me to think that something illegal was happening here under my own roof. And it went in so many different directions. One of them was, I'm responsible for what's happening in this house, Ken and we could get into a lot of shit. So it was very selfish of, oh no, this is against the law. And we're supposed to be the adults on duty here. But it was also, oh my gosh, who is this child? Yeah. So finding out that this is happening, I'm sitting in his old room now. This is my studio.
Right. Yeah.
And I am looking at the closet where he somehow snuck in all this stuff, including a grow lamp. And he was growing this weed in his closet. And I just, oh, wow. It felt like such a shock, like a smack. You think this is your house? Oh, yeah. Wait a minute. Think again. It was tough. And I think there was so much happening because I was too close to it. I had no sense of perspective. I didn't have a place where I could go to say, this is a rite of passage or part of what happens. And we've raised him really well. He'll probably be fine on the other side. Most people who do this stuff try it and then move on. When we told one of your dad's colleagues about it, I mean, it just took me down at the knees, Justin. I was teaching college level writing at the time, and I could barely get out of bed in the morning. I was so shook up. I was just shredded by this. I felt like I had just been handed a shit sandwich and I had to eat the whole thing. And I'd get up, I'd go to work, I'd go through the motions, and I'd come home and I would just collapse. I found it so emotionally overwhelming. I totally binge watched, what was the thing on Doc Martin? And it was just like, leave me alone. I'm going away to this little village.
You had to escape.
It was the first time in my life I binged anything.
Oh, wow.
Totally escaping this reality.
Mommy's first binge.
And there was other stuff going on with him. He and one of the neighbors got into trouble, and then one of the school friend moms contacted me and said, "Oh, by the way, our son's phone is on our account, and they're exchanging texts, and this is what it says. We thought you should know." So it was just such a shitstorm at that time.
Yeah.
Barely making it through the day, just feeling like, what's going to happen? My son is so precious, and he's going down this track. And of course, I just catastrophized it. It wasn't just, this is a possible one-time thing.
Sure.
He's going to drop out of school. He's going to become an addict. He's going to be dealing drugs. He's going to have, Mark's his veins.
Right.
I went to the nth degree. This is way before therapy. This is way before perspective.
Right.
I was a mess. I can't even imagine what it was like for you to watch me, to live through it.
Well, I remember that you told me this after the fact. This was like a hindsight reflection for you, but you said that you like had this memory of like going into your closet and like banging against the wall, or like you were like crying or like wanting to scream. And I don't remember if you were like banging against the wall or if you were like, I don't know. I just remember you said you were in the closet and you like had this moment where you were like, something's not right. Maybe
I was banging my head against the wall. Literally. I was in so much pain. I wanted to shift it from my emotional sensory pain to physical pain. I was just banging my forehead on the closet wall.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I'm like, this is not tenable. This is no way to live.
You were hitting a point that was so extreme that you were like, oh, like something's really not right. Yeah. Yeah.
The colleague we told about it, she chuckled, and I almost like, what? I had to do a double take. And she said, Graham's going to be fine, Rebecca. This is just now mind you, she is a single professional academic woman.
Yeah.
Who knows Graham.
Yeah.
And I actually felt comforted by her laughter. It was a moment of gaining a little bit of perspective, a little bit of distance.
Yeah, totally. Because it just can feel so all consuming, I imagine. And just like it narrows your perspective so drastically. Then it's just like even telling one other person and seeing their reaction and being like, huh, that's weird. Like they didn't fall to the floor, wailing.
Right. And they didn't tisk or shake their head or like, oh, it sucks to be you. No.
Right.
He had faith in Graham. That's how I read that. And I snapped out of it enough to say, well, damn, why don't I have faith in Graham?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. The memory that stands out the most to me about that time was, I don't know if you remember this, but I was a new driver at that time. And I think we were driving back from Santa Barbara or somewhere. And it was just you, me, and Dad in the car.
Okay.
And while we're in the car, I think you're next to me in the front seat or in the passenger seat. I'm driving. We're on the freeway. I'm already like on edge because the freeway is scary. It's California. I'm a new driver. It feels like I'm going to die every time I pull onto the freeway.
Right.
And you get a call from maybe like a school group because Graham was on like a school trip or something. And it was like the teacher who was like chaperoning and was revealing like, we found like a weed pipe or something. Graham was caught with like weed paraphernalia or weed or something of that sort. And I just remember you completely melted down. I remember you were like, I don't know what you said, but you were probably like, okay, thank you. Click, hang up the phone. And then you're like, fuck, you're like, shit. Like you start like banging on the dashboard as hard as you can. And I just like freaked out. I think I just like, I would never have done this had I not been stressed out. because I was just trying always to keep my emotions like so in check,
Mm.
and not cause any kind of conflict with you or dad. But I just lost it. And I was like, fuck, I started yelling, like trying to yell louder than you to like drown you out. And I was just like, shut the fuck up or something. And to me, that was like the craziest thing I'd ever done, and I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe I did that. And then we drive home the rest of the way, like in complete silence. So it was like,
oh, you poor girl.
So I didn't really feel like, I don't really remember in the moment if I was like, wow, that I should never have done that, or that was so bad. But it was just like this taste of conflict where I was like, okay, I lost control. And then it was kind of like silence, So on the one hand, it was sort of like, yeah, it wasn't like this big, it didn't turn into this big showdown or this big fight, but on the opposite end of the spectrum, it was just like complete silence, which is also scary because it's like, hello, like what's going on? Where do I stand? I'm not getting anything back, but that's like
I have no memory of your being the driver.
Oh
I vaguely
gosh.
remember the call and losing it.
Yeah.
And then I think I must have just put that into such a deep box.
Totally. It was traumatizing.
So much shame in that moment for me as a parent to have this stranger. And basically, Graham was chaperoned the rest of the trip 24/7 until they got him back to Riverside. I think he was only in San Diego. I don't think it was very far away.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was a pretty fucked up year.
Yeah, I think really stressful. I think really stressful for all of us. And we all had different ways of dealing with it. Yeah. So anyway, I think like, growing up with the influence of the church, which was filtered through you and dad, it just then, you and I and, dad and I as well, like we weren't really able to have a deep relationship because I wasn't really, letting you in on my life because the way that, I grew up and what it resulted in was me not really being able to have that deep of a connection with you guys because I wasn't really showing you who I was, or I wasn't able to really be authentic with you guys. Or I didn't feel like I was able to.
You had to protect. You had to self-protect.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that sort of started to shift though, after you had maybe been in therapy for a while and you started to make it clear that it was, that you were okay with the way that I was living. You were, coming around on things like, my sexuality, and you were not like condemning if I was drinking, it was just like, yeah, like that's fine. And it was just started to feel more safe to be, just kind of free and easy around you. So that's really a huge shift because I don't think you were able to, well, you tell me, do you feel like you were ever able to be yourself around your mom?
I was very guarded with my mom, and I picked up something from her that was words are still a little bit hard to find, but I'll do the best I can. There was this deep longing, almost desperation that I felt around her to be liked, to be seen as the fun parent and the one you wanted to spend time with. Not like she was competing with my dad. She just really, it was so important to be liked. This is not a surprise. I value that. I get it. But that desperation was a little off-putting because it felt so vulnerable. And at the same time, I protected myself because my mother was not emotionally reliable. Sometimes I knew she was dying for a confidence, and I wouldn't say too much because she might then become distressed. Oh no, you didn't say that. You didn't do that. You're not trying this. Or she would talk with my dad, and he was never emotionally safe. So he would bring back some judgment. She may not initially, but she would pass it on. So I definitely held back, and I wouldn't reveal the whole truth of what was going on with me. I would tell her things, but I wouldn't tell her everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not that you
Yeah.
have to, but yeah.
Yeah. Cause it might upset her, or she would tell your dad about it and then he would come back to you with judgment. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
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 Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Often the phrase was, after all we've done for you.
Wow.
Oh boy, that would just knock the wind out of me. I felt like I'd been taken down at the knees. Now, as a parent myself, I think, wait, I signed on for this. I'm doing this because I chose to be a parent, not because I'm trying to manipulate or win over or earn some kind of loyalty from my child.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know that that's what that felt so manipulative, but I couldn't have said, oh, this feels manipulative. I just knew, oh, I am a big ass disappointment.
Yeah. And then, so it's so hard to sum this up because I feel like there's been a lot of different phases of our relationship, and it's just continuing to evolve. But recently, I decided I wanted to join you in a therapy session with your therapist. And that was a big step because I felt ready to talk to you about, ways in which I felt like I was still holding back in the relationship and not really wanting to open up to you all that much, not seeking support from you, because I didn't want to deepen the relationship, and partly didn't want to deepen it because I wanted to kind of punish you for, things I was mad at you for, things I was hurt by. And so deciding to tell you all of those things within the context of a therapy session with your therapist, that was, that's a big step for our relationship. And it's cool that we can do that, and that you're willing to do that. And I think
thank you for being so brave, because even in the session you said, Mom, you sent me an email, you made a request to talk once a week. And the easy way out would have been to say, sure. And then you were honest and said, I feel this resistance. I want it. And maybe we can explore that. I was so honored and scared and grateful and surprised by just the simplicity of the way you handled it, and saying, could you please set up an appointment together? So thank you for taking the initiative, because if you had just said sure, we would never have moved ahead.
Right. And I think I played that out in my head. I was like, okay, I could say yes, and then it's going to mean we talk once a week, but I don't even really like talking because, the way that our conversations go just don't feel like all that fun for me. Meanwhile, it's largely because I'm not really sharing very much. It's just I'm kind of keeping it superficial. So I was like, well, wait a minute. This isn't very fair to say that you don't want this because it's not fun when you're the one who's making it not fun. So I just had that moment with myself where I was like, it doesn't have to be like this. And it also feels nice, I think, to be working towards a relationship together that feels more friendly And like I had the impulse the other day to send you an episode of a podcast that I liked. And, I don't do that. I wasn't finding myself before we had our therapy session. I wasn't finding myself wanting to share things like that with you. I would, share them with Dan or share them with a friend. Because I didn't want it to be seen as like this opening of like, let's deepen the relationship or like, let's talk about this. I think I was, avoiding that. So, it felt nice the other day to be like, to think about like, oh, like I want to send this to mom. And I was like, that's kind of nice. Like, it's just like, nice. That's kind of nice to like have that. And so, yeah, it just feels good to be now starting to like put into practice, taking steps into this new relationship and then seeing what that feels like. It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. And it is feeling like a new relationship. I also feel like those first steps started a while ago when you hosted the family book group and included me in that process. So I don't know, maybe that was a testing ground at some level to see what is it like, or you've taken the lead in initiating relationship growth and development, not just with me, but with other members of our family. And I have so much admiration and respect for that. So thank you.
And that's our show. Thanks for joining us. Our music is by Nightlight. We self-produce this podcast, so please subscribe, rate, and review. It really helps.